Imagine a military force, right, that is just so obsessed with following the rules, so like rigidly bound to their tactical manuals that they will literally stand in a burning room.
Just calmly reciting standard operating
Yeah.
procedure.
Exactly. Just reading the rules while the roof collapses and crushes them. So today we are looking at the Black Consuls. We're doing a deep dive into a universe where survival is, well, it's not a victory lap.
No, not at all.
It is a grueling, endless marathon that you're running on broken legs. And our mission today, okay, let's unpack this. We have a really fascinating and frankly deeply grim set of excerpts from a document titled The Eternal Vigil of the Black Consuls.
It's a heavy one.
Yeah, it really is. We're doing a deep analysis of an organization that's defined by just unimaginable loss, absolute dogma, and this obstinate, almost terrifying refusal to die.
We are exploring the absolute extremes of survival here.
Yeah.
I mean, we are treating the Black Consuls not just as like a military unit, but as a profound psychological case study.
Right.
It's about extreme resilience and the double-edged sword of total fanaticism. If you look at them through the lens of psychological endurance, they represent the darkest possible manifestation of the phrase, never give up.
Right. And I want to pull you, the listener, into this mindset before we get into the heavy lore here. Like, think about your own definition of victory versus survival.
Right, they're very different things.
Totally. Have you ever faced a situation, maybe a massive career collapse or a shattering personal loss, an illness, where there was no triumphant music playing at the end?
Yeah, no gold medal.
No cheering crowd, nothing. And the only triumph available to you was just waking up the next day and refusing to be erased. Where simply staying on the board took literally everything you had.
Because victory implies imposing your will on the obstacle,
Right.
right? Survival, especially in the context of the Black Consuls we're talking about, simply means the obstacle failed to completely annihilate you.
Wow.
Yeah. The psychological adaptations required to live permanently in that space of raw, uncelebrated survival. I mean, they're staggering.
Oh.
You don't come out of that kind of fire as a beautiful phoenix.
No.
You come out charred, hardened, and fundamentally changed.
And if an organization is going to survive the kind of catastrophic brink of extinction event we are going to talk about today, they don't suddenly develop a stubborn streak overnight, right?
No, absolutely not.
You don't become unyielding in the face of death unless you were forged to be unyielding from the very first day. So we need to look at the baseline conditions that created them.
Right, their origins.
Yeah, and the text we're examining provides a very specific, evocative starting point. It says the Black Consuls were, quote, born from the ashes of the Horus heresy during the Second Founding.
And, well, the terminology here is incredibly dense, but it's crucial for understanding their psychology.
Yeah.
Born from the ashes isn't just, poetic flourish.
It's literal.
Very much so. The document frames the Horus heresy as a galaxy-spanning civil war. It was a trauma on a scale that, honestly, it shatters the human mind to even contemplate.
Right.
Half of the Imperium's greatest defenders turned on the other half. It was brother slaughtering brother, basically burning down everything they had spent centuries building.
Jeez.
So the Black Consuls open their eyes for the very first time in a universe that is defined by the ultimate cataclysmic betrayal.
Wait, let me make sure I'm wrapping my head around this. If they are born immediately after this heresy during something called the Second Founding, that implies the First Founding, whatever that was.
The original legions, yeah.
Right. That it fundamentally failed. It broke
Yeah.
apart. So they are created as basically a corrective measure.
Yeah, it's essentially a patch on a broken system. The text refers to them as a primogenitor chapter, successors to the vaunted Ultramarines Legion.
Okay.
So during the Second Founding, the massive, unwieldy legions that fought the Horus heresy were broken down into smaller, more manageable chapters.
To prevent another civil war.
Exactly. You don't want any one commander having enough power to do that again. The Black Consuls are one of these smaller, localized forces, carrying the legacy of their forebears.
Now, the text says they carry both the genetic and the spiritual legacy of their Primarch, Robert Guilliman. But I'm stuck on this idea of genetic inheritance. Are we talking about, like, a metaphorical bloodline, or do they literally share this demigod's DNA?
Oh, it is intensely biological.
Wait, really? Because if it's biological, does that mean their stubbornness is literally coded into their cells?
Yes,
Okay.
exactly. In the context of this lore, these aren't just regular soldiers who train really hard. They are genetically engineered, heavily modified transhumans.
Wow.
The genetic material used to create them is drawn directly from their Primarch, Guilliman. So they literally have his biological imperatives, his physical resilience, and perhaps, his psychological predispositions woven right into their own bodies.
That is just a terrifying level of determinism. Like if you inherit a family business, you can always just quit and go open a bakery, right? But if you inherit your founder's actual DNA, you can't resign from your biology. Your duty is, it's basically fused to your skeleton.
And then you add the spiritual inheritance on top of that.
Yeah.
The text refers to them as the stern inheritors.
Stern inheritors.
They are burdened with the expectation of living up to an impossible legendary standard set by a being who is, to them, essentially a god. They don't just study Gilliman's teachings.
They embody them.
Right, and the text specifically notes they take them to the most extreme degree.
But taking someone's teachings to the most extreme degree, I mean, that sounds like a polite way of describing a fanatic.
It absolutely is.
If you are a successor, shouldn't your job be to adapt the legacy to survive the present? Taking it to that level sounds less like honor and more like dangerous inflexibility.
Well, elevating a founder's teachings from a set of best practices to sacred, infallible dogma completely removes your capacity for evolution.
Right.
You hit on the core tragedy of the Black Consuls right there. They mistake dangerous inflexibility for perfect loyalty.
It's like, okay, imagine a massive, world-spanning modern corporation. The founder was this visionary who built the company from nothing 100 years ago, and he wrote a strict employee handbook.
Okay, yeah.
A century later, the current board of directors doesn't just respect the handbook, they worship it. They fire people for deviating a millimeter from the founder's morning routine.
Right, no room for error.
They refuse to adopt new software because the founder didn't mention it in 1924, They lose all ability to adapt to a changing market because they are so obsessed with the exact literal words of the past.
And if your entire genesis is a reaction to the massive betrayal of the Horus Heresy, your overarching cultural directive just becomes paranoia.
Never let this happen again.
Exactly. And how do you ensure it never happens again? You become obsessed with control. You demand that every single member of your society acts with perfect, predictable obedience.
Because to them, free thought isn't an asset. Creativity isn't a virtue.
It's a threat.
Yeah. Deviation is exactly what caused the ashes they were born in. Those are the cracks in the foundation that bring the whole house down.
So they double down on the rules, they take Gilliman's teachings, and they crystallize them. They become the stern inheritors. Because to be anything less than stern is, in their minds, just an invitation to chaos and destruction.
Which leads us directly into how this paranoid, hyper-conservative mindset actually operates on a battlefield.
Right.
We've established their philosophical rigidity. But how does a philosophy of extreme, unyielding inheritance manifest when you are actually holding a weapon?
It's a good question.
According to the excerpts, they are known by the moniker the Snurnfists, and their culture and tactics are described with 3 very specific words: dogmatic, precise, and overwhelming.
Yes.
They possess an absolute adherence to something called the Codex Astartes.
And the Codex Astartes is really the beating heart of their operational reality. In this lore, it appears to be the ultimate military, organizational, and perhaps even civic manual, authored by their primarch, Gilliman. But what's fascinating here is, pay attention to the adjectives the text uses to describe their relationship with it. Pitiless, unyielding application.
Pitiless and unyielding. I mean, those are words you use to describe a glacier or like an industrial trash compactor.
Yeah, exactly.
They aren't words you associate with dynamic, creative problem solving on a fluid battlefield.
They are the words of a machine. The text directly links this fanaticism to their eventual vulnerability, honestly. Dogma and precision, when applied to warfare, provide incredible, terrifying strength.
Sure.
If you have an army operating with mathematical perfection, where every single soldier knows exactly what to do in every conceivable scenario outlined in a massive encyclopedia of war, you have a devastatingly effective force.
But let's pull on that thread because I have a serious question about this.
Yeah.
If you are fighting the Black Consuls and you know for a fact that they are 100% dogmatic, doesn't that make them completely predictable?
It absolutely does.
If they always follow the Codex, then their reactions are essentially pre-programmed. Like, if I know that an enemy force will always fall back and form a specific defensive perimeter when their left flank is pressured, just because page 400 of their holy book tells them to, I don't need to outfight them.
No, you don't.
I just need to mine the area where I know they're going to stand.
Predictability is the ultimate vulnerability in any protracted conflict. The tension here is between precision and overwhelming force.
Right.
Usually when we think of overwhelming force, we picture a barbarian horde, a massive, chaotic tidal wave of bodies that just washes over the enemy. It's messy, it's loud, it's fueled by adrenaline and rage.
Yeah.
But the Black Consul's overwhelming force is described as precise.
Which means it's mechanized. It's utterly emotionless. It's basically an industrial meat grinder operating at optimal efficiency.
Exactly.
They don't charge a hill because they're angry at the enemy. They charge the hill because the Codex dictates that neutralizing the high ground at this specific juncture in the battle reduces enemy combat effectiveness by 43.7%.
Think about an incredibly advanced AI designed to play chess. It calculates millions of moves a second. As long as the parameters of the game are normal, as long as the opponent plays by the established rules of chess, the AI is a stern fist.
Right.
It will crush a human opponent with dogmatic, precise, overwhelming logic.
But what happens when you introduce a completely illogical variable? What if, in the middle of the game, I don't move my knight, but instead I just pour a hot cup of coffee all over the chessboard?
The AI has no programming for that.
Right. The Codex of Chess doesn't cover opponent commits minor arson. The flawless machine doesn't just falter, it catastrophically fails.
Yes.
It tries to apply chess rules to the coffee. It shorts out because it literally cannot process a reality outside its dogmatic parameters.
And the Black Consuls built their entire existence around the belief that the universe operates according to the rules of the Codex Astartes. Their pitiless application of those rules made them legends.
It did.
It allowed them to crush countless foes. But it also made them brittle. A sword forged to be infinitely hard, without any flexibility, will not bend when struck at an awkward angle.
It will shatter.
It will shatter.
And that unexpected, illogical variable, that cup of coffee poured on the chessboard, that shattering blow from an awkward angle, is exactly what broke their flawless machine.
It is.
The text moves us from their philosophy directly to their ultimate test, and the source material is incredibly blunt about what happens next. In the year 455.M41, the vast majority of the Black Consuls chapter was wiped out, erased.
Completely.
And it didn't happen across a century of slow decline. It happened in a single event, the Siege of Goddeth Hive.
The structural and emotional devastation of this event is the fulcrum upon which their entire identity turns. The text explicitly notes that their history was once glorious and dogmatic.
Right.
They were the proud, stern inheritors. But this single siege at Goddeth Hive abruptly, violently ends that era. And the text specifically highlights the cause, not merely as an overwhelming enemy army, but as a shattering betrayal.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. I want to spend a lot of time on the mechanics of this because the text links their near annihilation explicitly to betrayal and fanaticism.
Yes.
Did their fanaticism make them blind to the betrayal? I mean, when you view the universe strictly through the rigid lens of the Codex, you are so focused on confirming your own worldview that you probably never expect a knife in the back from an ally.
Paranoia, paradoxically, can create massive blind spots.
Really? How so?
Well, if you are entirely focused on enemies behaving exactly as the Codex predicts enemies will behave, you are completely unprepared for a friend who throws away the rulebook.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Betrayal requires trust, yes, but it also requires a subversion of expectations. The Black Consuls, in their dogmatic rigidity, likely couldn't even conceptualize the betrayal until the knife was already twisting in their spine.
Let's visualize Goddeth Hive for a second. The text calls it a hive, which in this universe implies a staggering continent-sized arcology. We're talking about a structure with billions of inhabitants, a sprawling, claustrophobic nightmare of layered strata, industrial zones, and subterranean tunnels. It is the absolute worst place to try and deploy a mathematically precise, standardized military force.
Oh, without a doubt. The stern fists, who rely on overwhelming unified application of force, suddenly find themselves pinned down in an environment that is pure, unregulated chaos.
Right.
The structural devastation is one thing, losing your best warriors, your chapter master, your heavy armor. But the psychological devastation is much worse.
Because it proves the Codex wrong.
Or at least it proves that the Codex cannot protect them from everything.
Yeah.
Imagine the cognitive dissonance experiencing that in real time.
Yeah.
You are a Black Consul. You have followed the rules perfectly your entire life. You are the genetic and spiritual heir of a demigod. You are righteous. Your formations are flawless.
Everything by the book.
And yet the ground opens up beneath you because the local planetary governor you were defending gave the enemy the defense grid codes. The universe doesn't care about your dogma.
Picture the exact moment of the fall at Goddeth Hive. I don't imagine the Black Consuls breaking rank or panicking.
They aren't programmed to panic.
Right. I imagine a stern, unyielding force standing shoulder to shoulder in the choking ash of a dying city, flawlessly executing their tactical doctrines, reciting passages from the Codex, even as the walls close in on them.
It's a chilling image.
They just keep applying calculated force until they are literally buried under the rubble of deception. It's a tragic, almost statuesque kind of death. They died exactly as they lived, inflexibly.
And that single catastrophic event essentially erases them from the grand narrative of the Imperium. For all intents and purposes, the glorious history of the Black Consuls ends in the dust of Goddeth Hive.
Yeah.
The main force is destroyed, the leadership is gone, the legacy is shattered.
But if the vast majority of the chapter was annihilated, it begs the obvious question, how are we still talking about them? How is there a story left to tell, enough to warrant a document called the Eternal Vigil? The answer, incredibly, lies not in their overwhelming combat prowess, and not in their glorious heritage, but in a mundane, almost bureaucratic administrative detail.
The survival of their genetic line pivots on an organizational technicality.
Yes. We are introduced in the text to a group referred to as the not quite dead, the survivors. The text explains that while the main force was believed completely destroyed at the Hive, a scattered fraction of Black Consuls survived specifically because they were on detached duty across the vast Imperium.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the irony here is absolutely staggering. We just spent 20 minutes dissecting how the Black Consuls are defined by unified, overwhelming, precise force.
Right, the whole stern fist thing.
Exactly. They operate as a single, unyielding fist. And yet the only reason they didn't go entirely extinct is because they were fragmented. They survived only because they were separated from the main body.
It's like the ultimate decentralized backup system. Think about a massive global banking corporation. The main headquarters, let's call it Goddeth Hive, is entirely destroyed by a catastrophic targeted computer virus that physically fries the servers and the building itself.
Right.
Every piece of data, every central executive, the entire core infrastructure is gone. The company should be dead. But the company survives simply because a handful of mid-level IT employees were working remotely at coffee shops in different countries, and their laptops weren't connected to the main network at the exact hour the virus hit.
Their survival was an accident of administration. It wasn't a heroic last stand that saved the chapter. It was literally a deployment roster.
Let's really dive into the psychology of these survivors, these remote workers of the Black Consuls. What is it actually like to be on detached duty?
It has to be incredibly isolating.
You might be guarding an obscure listening post on an asteroid at the edge of known space. You might be serving as a liaison on a massive naval vessel that's been traveling in the void for months. You are completely isolated. And then you receive a fractured, garbled astropathic transmission that your home, your commanders, your entire brotherhood, the absolute core of your identity has been turned to ash.
The psychological burden would be paralyzing. The text uses the term "not quite dead," which is such a haunting specific phrase.
It really is.
It implies they are ghosts haunting a universe that has already moved on without them. The survivor's guilt would be astronomical.
How could it not be? You are raised from childhood to believe that unity is strength. You are conditioned to die for your brothers. When you receive that transmission, the immediate, overwhelming thought must be, why wasn't I there?
Exactly.
Why did I survive when the absolute best of us, the chapter master himself, fell?
And beyond the guilt, there is the immense crushing pressure of carrying the genetic legacy of Guilliman alone. When there were 1,000 of them operating as a unified chapter, that burden was shared.
Yeah, distributed.
The weight of the Primarch's expectations was distributed across an entire army. Now imagine a single Black Consul, light years from anyone who shares his genetic code, realizing that he alone represents a fraction of the biological and spiritual DNA of his god.
Wow.
If he dies, a piece of that mythic legacy dies with him.
The isolation is staggering. You are a fanatic, biologically and psychologically programmed for a unified dogmatic existence, and suddenly you are entirely alone in a dark universe. The stern fists are just a scattered handful of severed fingers spread across the stars.
That's a great way to put it.
You have no command structure, you have no heavy support, you have no overwhelming force. All you have is your holy book and your grief.
And what does a genetically engineered dogmatic fanatic do with grief? They don't seek therapy. They don't retire to a quiet farming world.
No.
They weaponize the grief.
Which brings us to the final and frankly the most disturbing section of the excerpts. The text doesn't leave these scattered remnants to fade quietly into the annals of history. There is a massive shift in the current setting that fundamentally changes their trajectory.
The Primaris renewal.
Right. The text introduces this mechanism.
Yes, the text states that in the current era, their status is no longer simply destroyed. They have been renewed. They have been rebuilt with Primaris technology, which in this universe implies an influx of new, even more advanced genetic engineering and recruits.
But the text immediately pivots from this idea of renewal to a heading that just stops you in your tracks. The ultimate horror of the Black Consuls.
Yes.
It says their survival is a testament to stubborn determination, but it's also a grim reminder that survival often comes not through victory, but through a sheer, obstinate refusal to admit defeat.
We really need to unpack the juxtaposition of those two concepts, renewal and horror.
Yeah, let's do that.
In almost any other context, a renewal is a joyous occasion. It's the forest growing back. But the text frames their continued existence as a fundamental horror. Why? Because they weren't saved by a triumphant, glorious victory.
Right.
They didn't rally their scattered forces, avenge Goddeth Hive, and rebuild a utopian society. They survived by simply stubbornly refusing to die.
The horror is the realization of what survival actually costs in the Imperium. This is a universe that is painted as a place where devout, unyielding, perfectly obedient servants are shattered, betrayed, and ground into dust.
And their only reward for their absolute loyalty.
Their only reward for surviving the meat grinder and carrying the burden of the not quite dead. They get upgraded, handed a bigger gun, and shoved right back into the meat grinder.
The ultimate horror is the cosmic indifference to their devotion. They were the most perfect soldiers. They followed the rules of the Codex Astartes better than anyone else.
And the universe still betrayed them.
Exactly. Their reward for surviving that trauma is simply an endless, agonizing continuation of the fight. The title of the document is The Eternal Vigil. It never ends.
I have to ask you, the listener, to consider the emotional toll of this. Is this Primaris renewal actually a blessing for the Black Consuls, or is it a curse?
That's the real question.
If you have been stripped of your history, betrayed by your allies, and left with nothing but a century of survivor's guilt, is being physically rebuilt and told to go back to the front lines of salvation, or is it a special, personalized kind of hell?
It raises a profound question about their identity. What does a chapter look like after being rebuilt from the ashes of the not quite dead? They are no longer just the stern, proud inheritors of a glorious past.
No.
That past is gone. It died at Goddeth Hive. They are heavily scarred by betrayal. The text explicitly mentions their vengeful pursuit of their enemies.
Right.
Their fanaticism is no longer just fueled by dogmatic pride in their Primarch. It is fueled by a bottomless, toxic will of vengeance.
They are essentially a weapon forged entirely from trauma. Before Goddeth Hive, their unyielding nature was a point of pride. It was an emulation of their legendary founder.
Yeah.
After Goddeth Hive, their unyielding nature is a trauma response. It's an obstinate, white-knuckled refusal to admit that the universe broke them.
They are holding themselves together through pure, spiteful willpower. The ultimate horror is that they have become the walking, armored embodiment of profound psychological injury.
Wow.
They cannot stop fighting because if they stop fighting, the adrenaline fades, and they have to actually feel the pain of what they lost. The only way they know how to honor the dead of Goddeth Hive is to ensure there are more dead enemies.
It recontextualizes their entire existence. The dogmatic, precise, overwhelming force is no longer a tactical choice made from a position of superiority. It's a psychological necessity made from a position of desperation.
Yes.
They have to follow the rules of the Codex because the rules are the only structure separating them from the abyss of total despair.
And this dark revelation about the nature of their survival brings us to the core philosophical lesson we can take away from the tragedy of the Black Consuls.
So let's summarize the incredible grim arc we've unpacked today. We started with the proud, dogmatic inheritors of Roboute Guilliman, forged in the ashes of a galactic civil war. A group that believed their genetic purity and their unyielding adherence to a rulebook made them invincible.
Right.
Then we witnessed their shattering at the siege of Goddeth Hive, victims of the very predictability their dogma created, undone by a betrayal their rigid minds couldn't comprehend.
From there, we followed the scattered, isolated survivors, the remote workers on detached duty, who endured not through martial superiority, but through sheer geographical accident and a crushing burden of survivor's guilt.
Yeah.
And finally, we arrived at their grim Primaris renewal, recognizing that their continued existence is not a triumphant rebirth, but an endless, vengeful slog, fueled by an obstinate refusal to admit defeat.
And the most powerful takeaway here, the reason this deep dive matters beyond just the specific lore of this universe, is the radical redefinition of success.
Hmm.
We are constantly taught that success equals winning, defeating the enemy, curing the disease, getting the promotion.
Right.
But the Black Consuls teach us that sometimes, when facing overwhelming odds, systemic betrayal, or absolute destruction, just staying on the board, refusing to be erased, is the most profound act of defiance possible.
It completely strips away the romanticism we usually attach to survival.
Mm.
It reminds us that endurance is often ugly.
Yeah.
It is painful, and it is deeply, profoundly compromising.
And while you, listening to this, aren't wearing genetic enhancements and fighting in the grim darkness of a galactic war, the core principle here is incredibly relatable. Think about the shattering moments in your own life.
We all...
When your personal Goddeth Hive happens, when you are betrayed by someone you trusted, when your foundation crumbles, when everything you did perfectly by the book still results in absolute disaster.
Yeah.
In those moments, an obstinate refusal to admit defeat might be the only tool you have left. Sometimes, just refusing to disappear is the only victory you get.
However, we also have to engage our critical thinking and look at the cost of that refusal. What happens to the human psyche when it operates purely on vengeance and survival instincts for too long?
I want to leave you with a final provocative thought to mull over, building on everything we've discussed today. We've established that the Black Consuls survived through a dark transformation, from proud inheritors of a golden legacy to vengeful, trauma-driven survivors holding themselves together with spite.
Right.
If surviving absolute destruction requires you to become entirely unyielding, vengeful, and pitiless, well, at what point do you cease to be the thing you were originally fighting to protect?
That is the question.
Have the Black Consuls actually saved their chapter? Or did the soul of the chapter die at Goddeth Hive, and these renewed survivors are actually a completely different, darker entity simply wearing the faces, the armor, and the name of the dead? Are they preserving a legacy, or are they just the shape of trauma, armed to the teeth and growing in the dark? Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Take care of yourselves out there, and remember, the universe is rarely as binary as we want it to be.